The Red Ettin, a tale told in England and Scotland. Once there lived a poor widow who had 2 sons, and the time came when the eldest wished to leave home to seek his fortune. So the widow took her last bit of oatmeal and baked a good round bannock. Then she said, "Son, will you take with you on your journey the whole or the half of this bannock?" And the youth, thinking only that he might be traveling far, and never for a moment thinking that he would be carrying off all the food there was in the house, answered right merrily, "I'll take the whole bannock." After that he gave his brother a knife and said, "Look at this knife every day. If it continues to shine, you'll know I'm well. But if it grows rusty, you may be sure that some ill has befallen me." Then the youth put the bannock under his arm and started out on his journey. He had traveled far when he saw an old woman standing by the roadside. "Kind sir," she said, "I am very hungry. Will you give me a bit of your bannock?" But the youth answered, "Nay, I have no more than enough for myself." And he left her and went on his way. The next afternoon he met an old man who was tending sheep, and he asked to whom the sheep belonged. "To the dread Red Ettin of Ireland," the shepherd answered. Then he started to sing in a sad, mournful voice, "The Red Ettin of Ireland once lived in Ballygan. He stole King Malcolm's daughter, the King of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays on her with a band, and every night he strikes her with a bright silver wand." Then the shepherd went on to say that all the country of the Ettin was a very dangerous place. But the youth continued on his way, and in a short time he saw a multitude of beasts plunging toward him. Like great bulls they looked, but each of them had 2 heads, and on each head were 4 great horns. Then the youth was sorely frightened, and he ran away in a hurry. Soon he saw a castle rising up on a hill before him, and when he reached the place, one door was standing open, so he flung himself over the doorstep and found himself in the kitchen. Before the fire an old woman was sitting, and when he had recovered his breath, the youth asked if he might take shelter for the night in her kitchen. "Aye, you may stay the night here," she answered, "but it's no good place to be, for this is the castle of the Red Ettin, and he's a monster in shape of a man, but with 3 great heads. He spares no earthly man." On hearing that, the youth knew not what to do. He feared to leave the place because of those monstrous beasts, and he feared to stay because of the monstrous Ettin. But he thought that if he could only hide for the night, he might get safely away in the morning. So he begged the woman to hide him, and she showed him a dark little hole behind a pile of wood. But he had scarcely crawled into the hole when the awful Red Ettin came into the kitchen. At once he shouted, "Snook butt and snook ban, I find the smell of an earthly man." And with that he started to search the kitchen. In no time he found the poor youth, dragged him out of the hole, held him fast with one hand, and roared, "Answer 3 questions or you shall die." Then the first head asked, "A thing without an end, what's that?" But the young man did not know. So the second head cried, "The smaller the more dangerous, what's that?" But the young man did not know. Lastly the third head cried, "The dead carrying the living, riddle me that." But the young man had to give it up. So the Red Ettin took a mallet, knocked him on the head, and turned him into a pillar of stone. On the morning after this happened, the younger son took out his brother's knife to look at it, as usual, and he was grieved to find it no longer shining, but brown with rust. Then he told his mother that the time was come for him to go away on his travels also. So as he had been providing her with meal, she took the last of it and baked a bannock for him. But when she asked the younger son, as she had the older one, whether he would take with him all the bannock or only half, he answered, "I'll take but half, my mother, for you'll be needing the rest." Thus he went away on his journey, and after a time he too met the old woman by the roadside. "Kind sir, I am very hungry," she said. "Will you give me a bit of your bannock?" "Gladly, good dame," the youth answered, and he gave her a piece of his bannock. At that the old woman smiled and gave him a magic wand, for she was a fairy, and she told him many things about what would happen to him and what he must do in all circumstances. Then she vanished out of his sight. By and by he came on the old man herding sheep, and he too heard the mournful song the old shepherd sang about the poor daughter of the King of Scotland, whom the Ettin kept bound in prison, and whom he so cruelly beat. Then the youth vowed to himself that he would save that fair Scottish lady, and he went on to the place where the monstrous beast came plunging toward him. But he didn't run, not he. He stood his ground and faced them squarely, and when the beasts saw that he refused to run from them, they all turned tail and ran from him. Thus the younger son came in time to the Ettin's castle and entered the kitchen as the older son had. The old woman by the fire warned him of the terrible Red Ettin, but he was not to be daunted. Then they heard the Ettin coming down the hallway, and now he was roaring, "Snook butt and snook ban, I find the smell of an earthly man. Be he living or be he dead, his heart in the fire shall bake my bread." As soon as he came through the doorway, he spied the young man. Then he halted to roar that the youth's life would only be spared if he could answer 3 questions. But the young man had been told the answers by the good fairy. So when the first head asked, "What's a thing without an end?" he said, "A ball." And when the second head asked, "The smaller, the more dangerous, what's that?" he replied, "A bridge." And lastly, when the third head asked, "When the dead carry the living," he answered, "When a wooden ship sails on the sea bearing men." Then the Red Ettin, finding that the youth could answer all his questions, knew that his power was gone, and he let out a snarl of rage. But the young man seized an axe and cut off all the monster's 3 heads. After that he asked the old woman to show him where the poor distressed daughter of the King of Scotland lay. So the old woman took him upstairs. There she opened many doors, and out of each came a beautiful lady who had been imprisoned by the Ettin. Loveliest of all was the daughter of the King of Scotland, who gave him a grateful kiss. Then the old woman took the youth back to the kitchen and showed him the stone pillar, which she said was all that remained of his brother. But the youth had only to touch the pillar with his wand, when his brother came back to life, smiled gladly, and embraced him. Next day the whole happy company set out for the castle of the King of Scotland, and when they reached there, the king was so overjoyed to have his daughter back safe that he gave her to the youth in marriage, and they all lived happily ever after.